Today, we want to talk about what I call my cash cap rule. So we're talking about how much cash should somebody keep in the bank, have set to the side, all that kind of good stuff. So many people, in my opinion, they hoard cash, almost too much cash to the side because one, it feels good, it feels safe. It's nice to see a big, nice number sitting in your savings account. And even for me, sometimes I even have a little too much cash laying around. And literally, though, every month that we just have cash, especially if it's sitting in a bank earning 0.001% interest at a big bank, ideally we have extra cash sitting in a high yield savings account, at least earning 3-4%. So you're offsetting inflation. But if you have too much cash sitting there every single month, every single year, that cash becomes less and less valuable, meaning it can buy less and less things. So that dollar that you might get a full dollar for today, it might only be worth 90 cents down the road. And of course, if you're paying attention at all right now, the US dollar's had its worst year ever in 2025. And so it's becoming less valuable around the world when you travel to other places. So there's three different parts that we want to talk about for what cash is actually for and what the best parking spots to have your cash sitting in right now. And I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute formula to set your cash cap. You know, how much should you have sitting around? Where should it be sitting around? What to do with it? And give you a quick 7-day plan on how to quickly fix that. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. So cash has jobs. It only does what you tell it to do. I would say money just sits there, has no emotions. It has no thought process. It only does what you tell it to do. So we're going to have 3 things that we want to talk about. We're going to put it up here on the whiteboard. We're going to show you 3 big circles. There's the emergency fund, rainy day fund, you know, that we always talk about. There's the put money aside for big purchases. Like, for example, right now, I have a 14-year-old car, so I've been thinking about what I'm going to do on the car front. And then the third circle is what I call dry powder. And dry powder is the cash that I sit to the side that is there so that when I want to pull the trigger on an investment or something that will eventually start making more money for me while I sleep, you want to have separate accounts for all these. They want to not all be in one bucket of money sitting in the bank, because then it is really easy to confuse yourself. It is really easy to dip into a pool of money that you're not looking for. And so you want to have them separate. You want to have them labeled, and you don't want to cross mingle this money, because then it becomes easy to dip into the emergency fund for a car or dip into the car fund for an investment. And so keep these things separate. Okay. Bucket number 1, emergency fund. This money needs to be in a high yield savings account. Okay. It might be with your brokerage. So like I have some money in my brokerage account that's in a money market account rather than a high yield savings account. End of the story is this. You want to be somewhere where you're earning 3, 4, 5%. And even if you have some money that is your emergency fund that potentially something you know for sure you're not going to need in the really short term, you might even be able to put it in a short-term certificate of deposit and even earn a little more interest. My daughter just did that because she did not at the time have enough cash to meet the minimum requirement for a high yield savings account where we were looking. And so there's a lot of things you want to do with that, but you definitely want to be at an FDI insured bank or place that if something were to happen, your money's insured, and you want to be able to get to it for the most part, instant access. The only one I mentioned is if you maybe take a portion of your emergency fund and you put it in some sort of CD that might have a 3 or 6 months time frame on it, then you can't get to that money unless you pay the penalties. But majority of it, you want to be able to make sure you can get to really easily. The second one is your big purchase fund. Same thing there. Just put it in a high yield savings account or a CD, and that money becomes separate. I'm doing that right now for a car. And the third account then is your, what I call dry powder, right? So that one can be a little less accessible. You might invest it a little into some sort of investment, but you want to be able to know that within a day or two or within a few days, you can easily get to that money and access it as well, so that you can then pull the trigger on, I want to buy a rental house. I want to buy this particular index fund. I want to buy this particular business or whatever it is. That's that money that you're saving up to actually either reinvest in your own company or your own business. It's money you're going to use to try to create more assets for yourself. And so those are those 3 things. And you just put them in your separate buckets. These would be extra money, obviously, that you would have after your regular living expenses in your life. So when you're, in that normal, what I like to call 50, 30, 20 budget, you're doing your 20% off the top for saving and investing, and you're living on that 80%. But if you can take that other money and put it to the side for these types of things, then that would be awesome. And you need to know what your protections are, meaning bank deposits are insured up to a limited amount of money. right? I think it's $250,000 FDIC. So you wouldn't want to have too much cash sitting in one institution. You might have to move it around if you're someone fortunate enough to save up those big buckets of cash. So then that way, if something were to happen, you'd be protected. Next, pay attention to the interest rates. I just had this happen on high yield savings accounts as a longtime real estate agent. As the 10-year treasury yield comes down and mortgage interest rates starting to come down, then many times the money market accounts, the high yield savings accounts, the interest rate they're paying you on those particular types of accounts, they will also start to come down as well. I noticed it in my own. I had some money sitting in my regular bank that was earning close to 4%. And then all of a sudden I started seeing it trickle down into the 2s. We had to get that money moved. So once you've got all this, plan in place, what is the formula? How much should be in each one of these things? So let's first start off with the emergency fund, because you got to have that first. And we talk about this one all the time, is minimum 3 months. Now, a lot of this is dependent upon the safety of your income, the safety of your job, how consistent you think your income is going to be. If there's 2-income family versus 1-income family, it's those kind of things. Now, I tend to like to have more because being a real estate agent, I don't get an automatic paycheck every other Friday or twice a month or once a month or what a lot of people have jobs, actual jobs get. So for me, I like to keep it more in that 6 to 12 month range because again, my income more fluctuates. So I end up sometimes having to dip in that account and then reimburse it a little more frequently than most people might do. So if you're a commission-based person or you just have inconsistent income, you might want to have that be a little bit longer. Then once you've gone there, then step 2, add near-term purchase. So like I mentioned before, I'm getting ready to get a car. My existing car is a 2014. It's time for me to upgrade the car. And I want to start putting cash away for that. So whether it's for a car or for a wedding or for saving up for me, it might be for taxes because like I said, I'm a self-employed person, so I might have to save some money up for that. I might need money because I want to buy another house or whatever thing that you might be planning to spend a lot of money on, you want to save that stuff up for there. And then step 3 is add an extra month buffer. So this is just that sanity buffer so that when you're going to bed at night, you're going to feel really good. And I always feel like having a little too much is better than not having enough. So that's a little added step in there to make sure you have that one. And then step 4 is your total cash cap. So any cash above that budget that you're setting up for yourselves, then that overflow can go into these accounts and this overflow can go to the side. So as an example, your monthly spend, let's just say, as an example, is $4,000. So if we wanted an emergency fund of 6 months and we want to purchase something in 9 months that we know is going to need $8,000, and then we want that sanity buffer of 1 extra month of $4,000, then your cash cap, your formula for you would be 6 months times $4,000, which would be $24,000. I almost can't do the math. Then you'd have that $8,000 put aside for your purchase and another $4,000 for your sanity. So that total of those numbers would be $36,000. But if you happen in your bank account had $60,000 and you've got this $24,000 overflow. So people always ask like, well, what do I do with the overflow? Because you don't want to then just go buy a car or spend the money frivolously. So what we want to do is we want to pick a lane of what we want to do. So you could try to create passive income for yourself, which might be just simple things like putting your money in your brokerage account in an index fund or putting an extra account because you're just super nervous about what's going on in the economy and a high yield savings earning 3 or 4%. Or you might park the cash in a CD because you get extra money and the money's tied up for 6 or 12 months. So there's some ways to have that money tied up and not be used, but be smart about that excess. It's great. Most people don't have any excess. And if you do, then you could start thinking about some of these long-term plans of maybe buying an investment property or house or some of those other things. But only invest the overflow in things if you know you're not going to need the money, say, for 3 to 5 years. So if you already owned your car and you already bought a house and your overhead was 6 months of reserves built up and sanity money built up and money set aside for that rainy day or maintenance on your house, whatever it might be, then your overflow money, like you want to make sure you have access to it if you need it. But if you're not going to need it anytime soon, just have it saved and invested and put to the side in non-retirement accounts, okay? Then, here are some of the taxes and traps that you have to be careful for. 1, all this stuff is taxable. So if you make interest from the bank, it's going to be taxable. If you earn interest on a lot of these other accounts or you make rental income, it's potentially going to be taxable. Like we talked about, the FDIC interest limits are not infinite. So if you have money sitting in a cash in an account in a bank, be careful you don't exceed the limit so you're not going to worry about that. And then don't chase teaser rates, meaning when people give you a rate that says, hey, the rate will be X for a few months, you got to pay attention to those things because eventually those rates start to come down and you're going to earn less and less and less. So, there's usually some sort of hoops, some sort of little games they play with you on how these rates might adjust. So you have to be careful with that. So here is what I want you to do. As we put this plan together, here's the 7-day action plan that we had talked about on what to do as you're trying to build these up. First off, step 1, you have to know what all your expenses are, and you have to that way know how many months of emergency fund you need. So like in the example we use, if you knew your monthly overhead was $4,000, then you want to make sure that you have 6 months, let's say 6 months of $4,000 would be $24,000 in your emergency fund. So that is something we want to try to set up and get that plan put in place on day 1. Now, day 2, let's figure out what purchases we might need and the dates we might need them. So if 3 years from now, we need a car, or my roof is getting to the end of its life, or I might need to pay for my kid's wedding or college, or my water heater's on its last legs. Things that you might need to be purchasing for. We need to know when estimated we think that might be and start putting that money to the side. On day 3, you want to open up that, if you don't have one already, dedicated high yield savings account so that we can start to put that excess emergency fund money in there so that it'll start to earn more than just have it sitting around doing nothing. Day 4, we're going to open up a second account that is going to be another high yield savings account that's going to be for purchases so that the accounts are separate. You might even open up a third or a fourth. If you want to keep all those accounts separate, you have as many high yield savings accounts as you want for all these different buckets, but you want to get those set up. Day 5, this is where we want to open up that brokerage account. So whether it's Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, whatever company you want to work it with, if you don't know how to do that, reach out to me. And then you have to understand the money needs to be invested. Now, it can sit in a money market account, which is just generally the same thing as a high yield savings account, or you can start to invest it into some index funds and some other things. But if you're going to invest it, it needs to be money you're not going to need for the long term. Then if you have excess, right? You want to move excess balances so that you match your cap rate. So if you've got all these accounts funded and now there's more and more excess, just keep putting that money into your brokerage account. You can use them for retirement savings or you can use them for non-retirement savings and investing. But let's just make sure we don't overdo those other accounts. And then on the last day, what we want to do is have this set up to run automatically. So when money comes in from your salary or however you make your money into your checking account, you want to set it up automatically so it goes to all these different accounts. So that way there's never did I, should I, could I. It happens automatically and then you live on the rest. So comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how many months emergency funds do you think you might need, what your current cash situation is, how can you figure out your specific situation, your numbers on what to do with all this stuff. But here's the thing. We want to make sure we get debt-free as far as consumer debt goes and build up these cash reserves. But then we want to be smart about what we're doing with these cash reserves and using that money so that we're not just having inflation eat away at it every month, but actually keeping up with inflation, hopefully doing a little more than inflation and be able to build up these reserves. I'm telling you, when you do, you sleep great, you're going to feel great. The anxiety and stress of money and worry go away. It makes your relationships better. There are just so many cool things that happen when you get your cash position updated and your debt's gone. So if you have questions, comment below. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this and what you're doing that maybe we didn't talk about today that will be helpful to other people.